Can you hear me back there in the cheap seats? I got a lot of friends back there. Thanks. They say that in Jerusalem, relationship with Jesus was a movement. By the time it got to Greece, it became a philosophy, and by the time it got to Rome, it was an institution. When it got to Europe, it became a culture. When it got to the United States, it became an enterprise. This is my first time here, so those of you, this is your first time here, I'm right with you. You know, I'm feeling comfortable among the craziness of some of the people here, and but I have no idea whose toes I'll step on, so because I'm a little out of my league in a sense. I want to tell you a couple things. One is I want to read some statistics. Now, in the book of Romans, the first thing that Paul does is he paints this really black picture, really dark, and that's because he wants to put the grace of God like a diamond against the blackest cloth that he can write. And so I'm going to do that in a sense. I'm going to give you kind of the blackest cloth so that you can see the grace of God as I talk to you about the grace of God. And at first, you're not going to get it. Well, some of you might get it, but I doubt it, okay? And it won't make sense to you at first, but by the time we're done today, you will get it. So I write this story for my kids, and Thomas is absolutely right. My whole goal, and it was Office Depot, not Office Max, but the whole goal was to get it to Office Depot by Christmas, which I failed to do, but we didn't have the money for the first 15 print run. Costs a lot of money to print that many pages and put it in a spiral bound little thing and with a cover on it. But I did get it done right after Christmas and gave it to my kids, and they went, nice, yeah, thanks, Dad. And it wasn't until other people read the book, my friends, and they gave it to their friends, and they gave it, the first manuscript. And people would write me emails, and people I didn't know that were being impacted by this little manuscript that had gotten out, and I'd take it to my kids and going, say, somebody's reading it. They've all eventually read it, and that's a whole other conversation, and they loved it. I am absolutely, with no question in my mind, that I have gotten to be part of something that is a God thing. It is, I didn't, when you write a story for your kids and you've never published anything in your whole life and you're not thinking you'll ever publish anything in your whole life, because I wasn't, you can write about it anything the way you want it because your kids will always forgive you, They're your kids. And it's not like the concepts and the ideas in the book are new to them. They're not. They are something that is woven into the fabric of our lives together. In fact, when Kim, when she read it, and she'd been aware of some of these emails, that have been coming in, she reads it and she says, "Am I stupid or what? What's everybody so excited about?" And my oldest son, Chad, and I have 6 kids. They range, Chad will be 28 on Monday, all the way to 15, 4 boys, 2 girls. And Chad says to Kim, my wife, he says, "Mom, that's because we've been having these kind of conversations for 10 years, right?" And so here's the blackness that I want to, and I'm going to run some statistics by you. And I'm going to say that this is the black cloth against which I want to paint a picture of grace. Okay? Next week, the shack will be #1 on the New York Times for the 14th week in a row. It showed up at #1. See, I'm painting the black cloth, okay? Well, I told you might have a little trouble understanding this. It's made it to #1 in Amazon in all books. The hardcover with absolutely no promotion has made it as low as number 88 in all books for Amazon. The Shack audio book is #1 at Amazon and elsewhere. The audio download is #1 at audible.com and #2 at other places. The ebook is #1 at Amazon Kindle, #1 and #2 at other vendors. The large print edition is out. Newsweek is running an article next week featuring an interview. The Spanish version in the US is slated to come out the fourth quarter. Walmart already wants 20,000 copies to start. Other offerings are coming in from the Condé Nast magazine system, which is Vogue, Glamour, GQ, Vanity Fair, Golf Digest, which is a really important one. And they've been talking about bringing out a basic ebook version to start and then offering a deluxe version with graphics and art and potentially music, connecting it through iTunes. It's very pioneering and pretty techie stuff. We love the fact that Shaq gets to lead out of the gate. $3.8 million in print. Anderson Merchandising feeling like they need to ramp up even more for Christmas after the meeting we had with them last week. They're used to having 40% of the market share, and they're nowhere close to that. And we just got off the phone with a company that has helped develop software to put books on the iPhone. They want the Shack to be the first book they release. Okay. Well, I'm like the other emails you get. And I get like 200 a day now from all over the world. I've got one email account that's got like 30,000 since January. And I have 3 email accounts. I'm like the other emails you get. I can't find the words to thank you. Honestly, it's not you I want to thank. I'm glad you listened to God and let him use you to say what he needs to say to a guy like me. But it's your wife. I'll read you the rest of that in a little while. I'm a missionary kid. I've been a part of movements all my whole life. In and around and about them. I've watched them. I'm a missionary kid, and I'm a preacher's kid. That combination will kill anybody. I grew up in a time where my parents' generation, they didn't know they had baggage, right? They wouldn't have known what to do with it if they'd found out they had it. And what you tend to do when you don't know or you don't want to deal with your stuff, what you tend to do is you dump it on the weakest and the ones who can't fight you back. A lot of times, that's the children. My youth growing up, I'm a Canadian. I've got a Canadian passport to this day, which makes it a lot of fun to be around political conversations down here in the U.S. because I can be neutral and say whatever I want. It's kind of fun. My sister, I'm the firstborn. My sister has she has a Dutch passport. She was born in the Netherlands, New Guinea. My brother Tim was born under the United Nations. It's the only time in history where the UN actually took over a piece of property for a while and ran it. My brother Stephen has an Indonesian passport. Third culture kids. Third culture kids have certain kinds of skills and certain kinds of abilities, and sometimes those strengths become their weaknesses as well. They can walk into a culture and learn to adapt. I mean, they just automatically know how to adapt across cultures, most of them. And third culture kids also, they can look from the outside and they can see what seems to be so normal for the people who are swimming in that ocean. Somebody from outside says, you know, there's a lot of inconsistencies here. And that either becomes a help or it becomes a weapon. And a lot of us who are MKs, especially coming out of that generation, was part of our weapon. You know, and we use humor and we use sarcasm, both which come from the very character and nature of God, I'm convinced. But can be also destructive, like anything. You know, in the very beginning, when the choice for independence occurred in the garden, all of a sudden we became the I am nots. I'm not, and you could fill in the blank, right? I'm not pretty enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not athletic enough. I'm not wealthy enough. I'm not I'm not, I'm not. The beauty about the I am nots is that you can't have one without an I am. The beauty about the I am nots is you cannot have one without the I am first. And there is something about God in terms of how He's made us and built us. The damage in us is damage of the I am. And the lie that says, now we are the I am not. So I'm a missionary kid. I grew up in a culture. I was 10 months old when we went into the highlands of New Guinea. They called the area we went into Cannibal Valley. Not because it was a nice name and they thought it was cute. If I'd have had time, I'd have shown you. I have this picture that I carry around. I got a bunch of them from when I grew up, but it's got a bunch of Dani, which is the name of the tribe. And we're talking 40,000 people over 100 square miles, okay? So it's not a little village. It's a major tribe. And it's in the Baleen Valley. And it's this picture is, I'm about all of 7, 8 years old, and I'm running out in front of this pack of warriors. And the caption I would want for that is appetizer. So I grew up in a different culture. And, everybody grows up in a place they call normal. It's the town called normal. It's what you think is normal until suddenly you get outside or around people who are outside of that context, and all of a sudden you realize those people are really strange. They're not normal. Doesn't everybody grow up around cannibals? And they're spirit-worshiping animists. They were very family-oriented inside their tribal communities. They were warring people. They had their witch doctors and their witches. One of the most terrifying memories I have is being chased by 2 demonically oppressed witches, older women with their potato spears trying to skewer me, and I was all of maybe 6. It was a dangerous place, and it was in many respects. But my parents are in their 20s. Come on. We tend to think of our parents as the age that they are now, as if they're always that old, in a sense, or not much younger. My parents were in their mid-20s. My father had not been a believer for that long, and he had a tremendous amount of baggage from his own history, real destructive stuff. And he brought an angry face to fatherhood, brutal. Actually, we had only we had 2 defenses. I did. I'm the oldest. I was 10 months old when we went in there. So this is the world I grew up in. This was my world. And when my dad would come with his anger, and a lot of it was directed in my direction, 2 defenses. One, you lie. Because if you tell the truth, you're going to get beat just as bad. So you learn to lie because sometimes you can get out of it. The only other defense we had, and I don't even know why. I've tried to go back and try to figure out why this started or when it started, but as long as I can remember, when my father would come at us in his fury, this is what we would cry. I'll be good. 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 For most of my life, I painted the face of God with the face of my father. And the message, of course, is, you're not. It's like the little girl comes back from her middle school, Sunday school class, and the mom says, so how was it? She said, oh, same old, same old. God is good. I'm not. Try harder. It was a time, I was the first person in that whole area that ever learned the language. This was a language that had never been spoken by anybody outside their tribal culture. And when I was 5 years old, the Wycliffe translators came in, and I was the informant because I was the only one that could speak the language fluently, and English as well. I was all of 5, 6 years old when I was the informant. And so I was embedded in the culture. Now, my parents, there was no training in cultural anthropology or contextualization or any of this stuff. They had no clue, not even spiritual warfare, nothing. So they're coming in, my mother's a medical missionary, and my dad is trying to build an airstrip and trying to set up a compound. The first house we had was a shack. I mean, it was just a grass house that the whole wall would come down during the day, because if it was kept up, they would have killed us. They're thinking that we were creating some black magic in there or something during the day. So the wall would come down every day so they could see everything that we did. I was picked up early in the morning and then dropped off at night because my parents were so busy. They had the work of God, and it was very demanding work. I mean, it took all their time. So I grew up referring to my parents as the Mungats, the ghost people. I didn't know that, I didn't have any connection. My dad, I just learned to stay out of his way. My mother was a follower. She was part of a generation in which women were to just obey, actually. I mean, if you want to be honest. And even when I went to boarding school, which was mandatory at age 6, and I flew out, 4 months later I came back, and I called my mother Aunt Betty. I called her a Betty because at the boarding school there was a white woman who took care of the girls' dorm, and everybody called her Betty. So I guess white women are Bettys. Now, her name's not Betty, but that shows you a little bit. It's a slice into saying that's how disconnected I was. I was around the conversations among the Dani tribal people about whether they were going to kill my parents or not. They were trying to decide. And I always felt safe because I was one of them. Even up until I was 38 years old and my world crashed, if you'd have put PaulYoung on a piece of paper and put the Dani tribe over here, and you'd put my parents over here, there would have been no hesitation at all. I'd have drawn a circle around the Danis, because they raised me. I mean, they were my family. When I got to boarding school and found out I wasn't black, it was a huge disappointment. I'm still disappointed about that, by the way. So here I am, I'm a child. The shack is a metaphor, in a sense. It's a parable and a metaphor. It's not an allegory, okay? It's a metaphor and a parable. A parable in that there's so much truth that is wrapped up inside of a story. That's what a parable is. A metaphor, the shack stands for the house of the human soul, mine in the story. I'm Mackenzie, and I'm Missy. And I'll explain that in a second. It's the house of the soul, the heart of a human being. Yours, mine. And some of our shacks, what's really going on inside, are devastated. Some of them have a better foundation than other ones. A lot depends on how you grow up. It depends on the relationship you have with your parents. It depends on the kinds of tragedies and losses that happen as a child. It depends on then what you do with that. It depends on how you've been influenced by others, by abuse, by addictions, by whatever, genetics. All of that goes into building the house on the inside, the human soul. And it's the place you store your addictions. It's the place you store your losses, your pain. It's held together by lies. It's where your shame lives. It's the human soul. And what we want God to do, what's that show where they build a house for somebody when they're gone on Extreme Makeover? That's what we want God to do. We want God to send us to Disneyland for a couple weeks and come back and have the shack all fixed up into some 3-story mansion. Right? I mean, he is a carpenter, so it totally makes sense. And we have a kind of spirituality that says, yeah, we know the shack is there, but but God doesn't like it. And he's disappointed in its existence. And he's kind of mad about it most of the time. So what we tend to do is we create a false front, a facade outside the front of the shack. You know what I'm talking about? And if you flipped it like this, what you'd have is a thin veneer of whatever it is that you're putting your identity in and how you want people to see you and how you want God to see you. A thin veneer above this ocean of shame for me. It's a facade. It's a building out here. And I became a perfectionist performer. I had an email from a gal. She's a writer out of Atlanta. And she says, Nashville. And Leanne says, I don't know your back history, but my sense is that Missy represents something that was murdered in you as a child. And Mackenzie represents you as an adult trying to deal with it. She's absolutely right. Part of the fabric of my shack is sexual abuse. And it started because of the culture is highly sexualized. It started around age 4. That's my earliest memories anyway. And it happened a lot. And it would happen 10 feet, 20 feet away from my parents. They'd just form up a circle. And by the time my memories are 5 and 6, I know it's not safe to talk to my parents. They're the moon gods. And by the time I'm 6, I'm a predator. I'm actually, at 6, setting up sexual situations. And I'm trying to survive as best I know how. I go to boarding school, and the big boys come and molest us first graders in a Christian missionary boarding school. And the boarding school was an awful place. Lots of things have changed since then. But I tell you, there were a generation of us that just got hammered. What do? God has given children, and you know this if you've been overseas and around some of the things, He has given children remarkable facility to survive. You either survive or you just lay down and die. The shack, you know. And you're so ashamed you won't let anybody through the front door, you know. And you're building the facade and you just think, man, if I can just, I'm in this situation, so I got to paint it these colors. But if I'm in this situation, I got to have these colors. And you become a person because you're all broken up into pieces on the inside. You've got to be different people in different situations. And you're trying to hold all this together by keeping your worlds apart and lying. And you develop certain skills. I'll tell you a couple of them. I went to 13 schools before I graduated high school. I know how to leave anywhere. And because I'm the firstborn and I'm a performer anyway, my little veneer, my little thing, you know, that I wanted God and people to believe was me, my performance was very religious, very spiritual. I could turn what was going on and justify it in religious language. So when somebody started to poke a hole through this little thin layer of performance and started to poke into the shame that was just pushing up underneath, if I couldn't turn a conversation back on them, if I couldn't find a way to justify myself, I could hear God calling me anywhere else. Because that still fit the spiritual performance. God could call me somewhere else. Thin little veneer. That's one of the skills. I'm not a very big guy. I'm like 5'6" and a wish, you know? And so I'm not good at fist fights. I always lost. I can't remember one that I ever won. And so you learn to survive other ways. For me, it was words. I can hide a knife inside a word. You will not believe it. I don't do that anymore. But that was a way to survive. Somebody came, and you don't have to be an abuse victim or anything like that in order to have this skill, because I've watched men do it with their wives a lot. When Kim would come to me and say, you know, there's something just not right about whatever, and she'd poke a hole down into my shame, By the time we left that conversation, she was feeling like a piece of crap. I was able to flip it back on her. And she would even say to me, I came in here knowing I was right. I have no idea how you just did what you did. But I'm going out of here feeling like I'm the one that was wrong. It's a survival skill. And you don't even know you're utilizing it. You're just trying to survive. And you're not trying to think and trying to figure all this stuff out. You're just trying to look at what's the next thing. Because you live inside of hypervigilance. That's another survival skill. Hypervigilance is that you walk into a room and you know where all the entrances are, you know where all the exits are, because everything is about safety. You've got to protect the shack because it's, you know, fundamentally that's who you are. And my relationship with God, I became a Jesus follower because of the tribe. They became Jesus followers and I followed them into the kingdom as a child. But my concept of God, and you know what? God was the only person in my life that was there consistently, even though he was, you know, a distance and he was upset with me most of the time, you know. And my concept of God was all about guilt-based performance, right? It was a very legalistic framework that I grew up in. It was all about being able to do the right thing. It was all about pleasing God. And my relationship, there was only a little sense of affection those moments that I was perfect, which isn't very much and very often. Because all this bubbling shack, this pressure. You know, when you're into that kind of, when you live with that kind of devastation underneath that is hidden like that, and it's pushing up on this little veneer, when people do give you approval and affection for what they see, you don't believe it. You can't. I mean, you can say thank you. I mean, it was so, turns out that I'm actually pretty smart and pretty creative. Just turns out. But I didn't know that. When I graduated summa cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa, all that stuff, at the end, when I got my diploma, you know what my thought was? I fooled them. I fooled them. So everything is about guilt and everything is about survival. When you walk in and you're hypervigilant, they teach this to people who work with terrorists, hypervigilance. You can be in one conversation, but you got feelers going out all over the room to find out if you can hear your name being spoken or something as a reference to you, and you'll make your way over to that section just to make sure that you're still safe. The worst thing that happens is that you end up with two people coming into your world at the same time from two different parts of your world, you know? You have a person from this set of lies comes in, and there's a person from that set of lies, both coming into the same room. Everything is highly, intensely based. And yet I pursued God with all of my heart. He was the only hope I had. And you know, you pray prayers, you know, you sing prayers. Worship is something you do 24 hours a day. Here we were singing praises. And we sing these things, and the Holy Spirit is living inside. You know what? The beauty of all this, and you don't even think about it, is in the midst of all your mess, the Holy Spirit is still showing up. And you don't even think what a miracle that is. You know? How strange is that? One of the things that this little behavioral shame does, what shame does, one of the things that shame does, and I think this may help some of you, shame destroys your ability to distinguish between a value statement and an observation. When Kim and I were first married, she would say, Paul, you don't mix the colors with the whites. Right? That's an observation. What did I hear? You are a sorry excuse for a human being. I don't know why I married you. I could not hear an observation that wasn't, to me, a value statement. I couldn't hear it. And I'm praying and asking God to heal me. I'm singing the dangerous songs that we shouldn't sing, you know, like I Want to Know You and Set Me Free and, you know, Create in Me a Clean Heart, which is all about the soul. So he set a trap, and her name was Kim Warren, who is now Kim Young. And I'm an adapter. You know, I'm a third culture kid, and I watched. And between Kim and her extended family, they're North Dakota, Minnesota, salt of the earth, nothing's gray in their worlds at all. They're genetically enhanced to all speak loudly at the same time and understand each other. I'm from a little spiritual, religious family where you hide everything, you don't talk about anything, you pretty much lie about most stuff, and you have to have an order of service to get together. Very dangerous worlds when they come together. You know, her world is not a place for a hypervigilant person to exist. I mean, literally, I'd be gone 15 minutes out of every hour that the family would come over because I couldn't handle it. I was just in the back room hyperventilating. And there's a lot to this story that I can't go into because of time. But let me tell you some things. I built my shack for 38 years with a lot of help from family and people, and it was all hidden. And I was out there performing the best I could. Missionary kid, preacher's kid, Bible school, seminary, working in the church. I was actually part of a little house church for about 7 years when the little facade, this building out front that I wanted everybody to believe in, it all blew to smithereens. It was, this little thing is highly religious. What would break that? And I'm praying, set me free, which is one of the craziest, dumbest things I've ever done. But, you know, it's a stacked deck. The Holy Spirit's inside going, hey, let's sing this song, you know? And if you manage to escape that part, you got to stop everybody from praying for you too. You know? How do you do that? I pray that you would free Paul. Well, don't, please, no. Because in my view, you know, God, He didn't like the shack. You know, and I'm trying to cover it up as best I can. And I'm running really hard at doing this. So this little thin veneer, I built it for 38 years. Cracked, busted up, a mess. January 4th, 1994, I start 11 years of going into the shack that is represented by a weekend for Mackenzie. You can't compare your healing, you can't compare your hurt even. You can put 10 little kids against the same exposure to abuse and you'll get 10 different responses because everybody is uniquely made. The soul of a human being is unique. You know what destroyed this little thing? January 4th, 1994, I get a phone call. It's Kim. And she says, Paul, I know. And what she knew was that I was having a 3-month affair with her best friend. And I call up the other woman, and she says, run away with me, which feeds right into everything that my history would say to do. But I'm at a place that running away would have been no different than to put a bullet in my head. And my choice was, face Kim and my shame, because now that this is gone, I only have the shack. That's all I have. That's all I am. And I went and faced Kim. And she beat the hell out of me. Like the first 2 years. Every day. She pounded on me until she drove me to the edge of the cliff. And I looked down into the mess of everything. And I lost all my hope. And a friend comes to Kim and says, he's a hurt boy like me, but he just never hit it. And he says, Kim, you know, I'm so sorry. It's not fair to you. You've come down from the mountain of normalcy to find out what some of us are like. But Paul's doing the best that he knows how. and I think if you hit him one more time, you're going to kill him. And Kim backed off. And Kim would walk every day during those first 2 years. And it took 11 years for her and I to heal. 11 years. And I never thought it would happen, because by the end of that first week, she said to me, I will never believe another thing that comes out of your mouth the rest of your life. And I believed her. But it wasn't about that anymore. I got to stay in the house because I broke hard, and because she wanted the kids to have a father. And I never, ever again pointed a finger back in her direction. By the point when everything blew up, I knew if I knew nothing else, that I couldn't heal myself. I've been trying for 30 years. And if I can't heal myself, how could I heal anybody else? I'm looking at this abyss, and all of my crap is down there. And I'm thinking, what do I do? I go back to before I'm 4 years old and try to find something that's real. What's not a survival skill, and what's not a defense mechanism? What do I do? And I'm thinking, okay, I'm done. I don't want my children. I have my 6th child had just been born, and I don't want my children to find my body. So I'm thinking about flying to Mexico and getting a room for a week and getting the drugs that are necessary. And this is all going through my mind when Kenny goes to Kim and says, I think if you hit him one more time, you're going to kill him. And Kitty, another friend of ours, comes to me and says, Paul, tell me where you are. And I describe this journey from a mile away where I won't deal with it, and Kim's pounding me every day. How can a human being do this to another human being? How could you do this to your children? Weren't you thinking about them? I've heard you teach, and I've heard you speak, and you do these great things. How can this exist in the same world? Pow! Until here I am, and I'm saying, Kitty, you know what I am? I'm a piece of dried up shit that the wind is blowing away, and I'm terrified that when it's done, there won't be anything left. And Kitty says, Paul, there's a seed. A seed. A seed. A seed. Huh. Seeds grow pretty good in this stuff, I guess, you know. And all my hope came back with this little seed. Something could grow. I didn't even know what it was. And it was the last time I was suicidal. I'd been suicidal our whole marriage. Just nobody knew it. When Kim would say, this is the right way to do dishes, I'd be suicidal. I'd drop into the little hole where I felt nothing. Same hole I was in when I was a kid. And I wouldn't know how to feel anything. Kim would walk every day those years, every day the first 2 years with her friend Mary Kay. Mary Kay saved her life. Kim saved mine. Kim would yell and scream and cuss so that she wouldn't come home and kill me. 11 years. 11 years. The stuff that's in the shack. You know what changed everything? When I reached for the door of the shack, Papa came flying through. He'd been in me the whole time. And I thought he was over there and mad and pissed off, and I wasn't performing well enough, and I was giving it everything I had. But all the religion in the world couldn't touch the damage in my heart. I needed Papa to come flying through the door and wrap me up in his arms and spin me around and say, I have been waiting for you here. And we can talk movements and we can talk all this stuff, which is wonderful and great, but we're talking about people. And every one of us is in need of the affection of the Father. Every breath is grace. Every breath is grace. I walk with a limp. I know who I am, and I know where I've come from. In those 11 years, He dealt with every piece of fear in my life. He dealt with, in 2005, at the end of 2004, I was the freest man that I knew by the grace of God. I have no addictions in my life. And I'm not talking just the crappy ones, you know, the pornography and all that kind of stuff. I'm not addicted to pleasing my earthly father. I'm not addicted to doing a great thing for God. I'm not addicted to significance. I'm not addicted to approval. I'm not addicted to pleasing you. I'm not addicted to pleasing God. You can either go down a path of trying to please God, or you can go down a path of trusting Him. One is all about your behavior. The other is all about His character. I don't have any secrets in my life, as you can see if you've read any of the articles that are out there. And Kim is good with this. Last summer, in a circle of friends who all know our story, because we didn't hide anything. When I went back in January of '94, I said, I can't have another secret in my life, because these secrets have killed me. And we are as sick as the secrets we keep. I don't have any skeletons in my closet. I don't have any reputation. They came out with the secrets. And last summer, Kim says in front of a group of people, our friends, she said, I never thought I would ever say this in my life. It was all worth it. It was all worth it. And she's not saying that the corruption and the sin and the betrayal were good things. She's saying they are redeemed things. People say, how do you keep this from going to your head? You think I would trade any of this for the sense of the constancy of the presence of the affection of the Father who loves me? There is no chance. That's why I painted the black cloth the way I did. Let me just finish this in closing. I'm glad you listened to God and let Him use you to say what He needed to say to a guy like me. But it's your wife I want to say a real thank you to. I can't think of a day that I never believed in God, Jesus, or the Holy Spirit, but I never knew them/Him until I read your book. My God was always the mean old man waiting to send me to hell. Jesus was never really all human because He was God's Son. That thinking always took me back to my shake of drinking. Then the kids were born, and a drunk can't be a good father, so I went to pain pills. Surely that's a good dad. Until March 24th, 2004, I quit breathing. Long story short, I started again in the ambulance of the company I worked for with my golf buddy doing CPR on me. The reason I'm telling you all this, that didn't even keep me sober. I was back eating pain meds and Xanax like candy. Then my wife keeps bugging me. Put the headset on and listen to this book. It took me only a few weeks, and like any good addict, to keep the heat off, I agreed. I'd put my 2 daughters to bed, go outside, and then listen to your/God's book. It took me 3 nights of sitting in the darkness of the night sky, wife thinking I'm back on drugs, to get through the book. I have a God that loves me now. He even loves the addict in me. He doesn't leave me if I slip and take a pill. I haven't in a while, but I bet he would say, only 50 more times of you flying into that mirror till you stop this crap, Bobby. God, I hope you're right, Paul. I want my God to be like that. Thank you. And thank your wife. At the end of 2004, the shack in my life had been transformed. 2005, the Lord whispers in my heart and says, this will be a year of Jubilee. You turn 50 this year. Nothing much happened. We moved into a little tiny rental in Gresham, and it was like the joy of the Lord just bombed our home. And the only other little thing that happened is I wrote this little story for my kids. Every breath is grace. And I stand here on a platform that is absolutely a God thing, telling you that apart from Jesus, we can do nothing. And that he has entered into our hearts to heal us from the inside out, something the law could never do. He came to set us free. And he doesn't violate the soul. Here's the verse, and I'm done. 1 Peter chapter 1 says, you have a faith that is being tried by fire. And fire is usually God, by the way. You have a faith that is being tried by fire, a faith that is worth more than gold, which just perishes. And you are now receiving, ongoing present tense, you are now receiving the object of your faith. You are now receiving the object of your faith. What's that? The salvation, the healing of your souls. He loves you. He has come bringing everything he is and uniting it with everything you are, knowing everything there is to know about you, to transform you through this relationship into everything you were intended to be for the praise of his glory, for the praise of his glory, for the praise of his glory. Amen.